Hello again, ladies and gents, and welcome back to another fascinating episode of the AJR Show. Today, we are joined by none other than Jaclyn Dunne, who is an activist. She is also a best-selling author, a naturopath, and unfortunately, a mother of a victim to a vaccine injury, which we'll talk about more as we go on. Jaclyn, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you for having me on.
So obviously I've been following like your journey and what you've been doing over quite some time. It's absolutely fascinating work. I've been a big fan, and it's been great to see you really speak your mind, and a lot of people become, very, very relevant to what you're talking about and follow you, like, and rightly so, because, you speak your truth, you speak from the heart, and it's absolutely fantastic. But one of the key things I thought we could talk about today is obviously the extensive work you do from a naturopath side of things based on your own experiences. But what I want to touch on first, if you don't mind, is like your journey really over the last 2 years, because obviously you knew something was wrong very early on, like many other people did. And I guess obviously the previous experience with your child prior to all of this starting helped that. What was the big turning points for you?
It's been a bit of a crazy journey for the last 10 years, if I'm honest. I started speaking out 10 years ago. Not people seem to think it's just 2 years ago when I did this video and it went viral. But for the years previous to that, I had been on this huge journey for natural and alternative health and healing because of what had happened to my daughter, which was really the first initial trigger point.
Can you just explain briefly what that was?
Yeah, sure. So, sorry, I always assume people know because I've been speaking about it for so long, but I have to appreciate that people are coming into this movement quite new, and the awakenings are happening all the time. So my daughter is now 13. I've got a 13-year-old and a 10-year-old, and when my 13-year-old was 8 weeks old, I took her for her 6-in-1 baby jabs, which was the DTaP vaccination alongside rotavirus and meningitis. So she had 8 different vaccines in one go, which is standard. That is standard, believe it or not. She was quite a low birth weight. She wasn't born early, but she was very tiny when she was born, only just kind of making 6 pounds. So she probably shouldn't have had that amount in one go anyway, if you want to look at it from that perspective. But long story short, I took her blind because I wasn't a naturopath then. I was a accountant, and I just wheeled her down to the doctor's surgery because that's what everyone did. And I'd spent my whole pregnancy researching cots and prams and car seats and baby monitors, and never really once thought to research anything else to do with medicine or nothing at all. Just had that blind faith, took her, and within 20 minutes after her appointment, she had a convulsion. It was a non-febrile convulsion, which was absolutely horrific to see. We'd got home from the doctor's surgery, and she'd fallen asleep in her pram. She wasn't hot, and I'd gone in the kitchen to make a cup of tea, and I could hear a rattling sound. I thought, where's that coming from? And when I went back into the hallway, it was the pram knocking the radiator as she was convulsing. So it was horrific, and I don't really know why I did what I did, but I picked her up out of the pram, ran outside the house with her because I just thought maybe she's hot, cool her down. She stopped pretty quickly. I rang my mum first and foremost, who was alive then, and she said to me, well, ring the doctors and then look into some research into vaccines, for God's sake. She actually worked for the NHS at that time. And then I rang the GP surgery, and they just said to me, don't panic, it can happen, just give us some Calpol. I said, but she's not even hot. And they was like, well, don't worry, it's quite normal. If it happens again, then just call us back or just ring an ambulance if it's really bad. And it just threw me. I was like, this is not right. And it was actually that night that I started researching. And I can honestly say I have never stopped since, because you can't, because there's always something else. It's like what we're doing now. There's more studies and research papers coming out all the time. So it's a never ending, evolving subject. But that was the kind of if you like, to me starting the process of an awakening. And I honestly really thought that when I started researching, I would find out that what happened to me, my story was just a fluke. I was just really unlucky, and most people are absolutely fine. But what I found out was completely the opposite, and actually terrifying. And my first gut instinct was, people need to know this. I need to talk about it. I need to start telling people. They don't know. And I thought people would thank me. How wrong I was.
Yeah, and then it was like,
speaking to me. Yep. I had good friends tell me that they didn't want their children to play with her anymore because we wasn't going to vaccinate anymore. I had friends that, I'd been friends with for many, many years, just completely disappear off the face of the earth, because you start to hold up a mirror that people aren't really prepared to look into at that point. So it's just easier for them to walk away, which I understand now. Everyone's on their own journey, but it took me a long time to get to that point. But yeah, for the rest of the ongoing years, I started to kind of drip feed information. And then a couple of years after that, my mum and dad actually died. My mum and dad hadn't been together for 30 years. My mum died on a Monday. My dad died on the Friday. Both died of lifestyle related conditions. Yeah, I wrote about it in the book because it was really the biggest catalyst for me. And at that time I had an autoimmune condition myself. And it was a massive wake-up call, like, my God, that's my gene pool. They're 64, they're gone. I've been orphaned in a week. What's going to happen to me? Are my kids going to have to go through this when they get to my age because I'm not looking after myself?
And that's a turning point very often. The case in, especially in places like the UK and Western society, where the majority of people's lives are 100 miles an hour, and they tend to just try and sort something out once something's happened or gone wrong. They don't see the dangers of the lifestyle until it actually goes bad.
And you know what's interesting? My sister, who's 7 years older than me, so I grieved instantly. I went into complete meltdown and I was just all over the place. But my sister was in very much denial, and she didn't really grieve for a very long time. She kind of locked it in. And 5 years later, she was diagnosed with cancer. She's absolutely fine now. But so it wasn't my mum and dad dying that was her wake-up call. It was her cancer diagnosis. And that's when she changed everything. So for me, it was, I changed everything. I started studying about natural health. I wanted to heal myself. I wanted to know how I can empower myself. I don't want to give other people the responsibility of my health. I want to look after myself. And then because I saw how that worked out for my mum, my mum would put complete faith into a healthcare system that ultimately, although they might have been keeping her alive in the short term, in the long term, it was detrimental, and she died. So I knew that I had to make changes because I was also relying on the same system, having an autoimmune condition. So I started to learn just for myself, really. I was never going to go into it as a profession, but I loved it so much. And people started saying to me, oh my God, you look so well. What have you been doing? So I thought I might as well make a career out of it. And I'd studied enough at that point that I'd actually started to gain qualifications. So I started to take on clients, and it's just kind of grown and grown and grown and gone a bit crazy. And then obviously the viral videos taken it to a whole nother level.
Well, talk to us about the whole naturopath side of things, because I know that many people have heard the term naturopath, and I've got friends who are naturopaths, and even though I've got an extensive strength and conditioning background, and like fitness coaching and stuff like that, you still, even as a personal trainer or somebody who's a coach in that, you're still very much in the system. If you've got a problem with yourself, unless you physically do the research and step out of that system. So I'm sure everybody can clearly see now, we're put into a system where you're very much indoctrinated at school, aren't you? And you're told what they want you to learn, even down to like histories and medicines and stuff like that, because it's almost like priming you that you need the responsibility of a healthcare professional or a physician. If something's wrong with you, starting to get a bit of a cold, I'll ring my doctor. It's the same with the people that a lot of people's, because they've had that responsibility taken off them, with this whole vaccine thing, is like, well, he's got a white coat, so I trust them. And if something goes wrong, it's my doctor's fault, because the responsibility is very much gone at that. And that's how we've been almost like groomed as a society, haven't we, in all these different countries into these systems. So stepping outside of that, and I'm learning a lot myself now about ancient healing, and how, I knew the body was powerful anyway, but just how powerful it is. And people aren't even touching on the fringes of just how powerful right now. And I think that's one of the big things, isn't it? Like trying to get across to people is, just how powerful and natural you can be.
I think that we live in a quick fix society, and we have done for probably about a century. That's been slowly changing and getting worse and worse. You know, I always speak to my clients about, because what's interesting is, just to give you a bit of a backstory, I work with clients of all different ages, from children right up to, 88-year-olds. And I always thought that the older they were, the more sick they would be. But actually, that's not the case. And I now realize that's because if you take that 88-year-old client, I once asked somebody in their 80s, when did they first get a fridge freezer? And they said they were in their 50s. So for half a century of their life, they shopped local, which was probably grown local, which was cooked the same day. So they didn't have the additives and the preservatives. And even if we just go back to when I was growing up, I'm 44. So when I was growing up, we didn't have all the kind of drive-throughs and the fast foods, and there was nowhere near as much choice of all this quick fixes. So, and that feeds into the healthcare system as well. We don't want to take responsibility. We want to be told what to do to make us just take that and everything will be fine. And lots of people of a certain generation do have white coat syndrome, where they won't listen to you. They won't take your advice unless you have doctor in front of your name and you're working in a hospital or doctor's surgery. And unfortunately, we've got the John D. Rockefeller to thank for that, where 100 odd years ago he decided to buy up all the medicine schools, which at that point were teaching homeopathy, herbalism. It was very natural. And he also brought up the pharmaceuticals, and he said that's what we're going to be teaching in them schools now. And then everything changed, and all of a sudden homeopaths were witches and they were vilified, and that's still the case now. They're still trying to get rid of a lot of the natural modalities in medicine, because they know it threatens the bottom line of the pharmaceuticals, which is a really sad state of affairs, because I'm not anti-pharma, I'm not anti anything, I'm actually pro-choice. And I believe that we should be told the pros and cons of anything that we are being given, so that we can make an informed choice. And most people who I speak to, certainly most of my clients who are on a very extensive list of prescription medication, they don't know the harm that it's doing to them. I had a client only yesterday who's on 17 different medications, and one of them I showed her in a book that I have, which is about drug and herb interactions, and I showed her all the things that just one of them depletes in her body. So this drug was depleting magnesium and sodium and potassium and iron. All of that one drug is depleting all of those things. Did the doctor tell her that when he prescribed it? Did he say, just so you know, by taking all of this, all of these vitamins and minerals will be depleted from your body and could cause other issues? They're not told that stuff. So the only thing that I'm ever campaigning for with anything, with pharma, with vaccines, anything, it's informed choice. We need to be able to make a fully informed decision, because we can do a lot more harm than good if we're not.
And I think that, that's the key message there, is the informed choice. But I mean, if you were on their side and you put informed choice into anything, they wouldn't sell much, because they know the damage that, I guess, long term, that it always does. And they don't keep people sick that way, do they?
Well, I always say there's no money in dead people, there's no money in well people. The money is straight down the middle, keeping people sick and dependent on medication. No money in dead people, no money in well people. But if I take you back to when my daughter was injured, when I then went and looked at that vaccine insert, one of the risks that are listed on the vaccine insert, which I covered when I made the documentary, The Trail of Truth, and we showed the vaccine insert, is that it can cause or create sudden infant death syndrome, which is cot death. So if I'd gone in that day and said, can you just tell me all the risks and the side effects of this particular vaccine? And they said, it can create a cot death. There's no way that I would have continued to allow her to be vaccinated that day. We would have left. But people weren't told this, so they can't make an informed choice. And lo and behold, the people that I speak to that come to ask for advice or are just following me because they have a dead or damaged child post-vaccination, sadly, some of them haven't even realised that one lady said to me that her child had died of a sudden infant death, so cot death. That was what was registered on the death certificate, but it was 48 hours after the vaccine. And then they hid that she asked for a autopsy, wasn't going to happen. It was just a cot death, that's it. She asked to see the medical notes, the file got lost. These are the kind of cover-ups and coincidences that happen because they know what they are doing to be able to get this amount of profit. It's outrageous. And this is what things like Bobby Kennedy has been, and Del Bigtree, they've been trying to bring to light in the States. But as far as I know, up until this point, there wasn't that many people on this side of the Atlantic that were kind of shouting from the same hymn sheet. But that's changing now, which is a really good thing.
Yeah, and it's great that you've been so heavily involved with all this and pushing forward with it, because it's obviously such a big part of your life. And I guess those moments like that can change anybody for the better. And obviously, look how good your own health is now as a result. And that then allows you to give the best version of you all the time, as a naturopath, a coach, a person, or someone to to lean on, but also to your kids as well, which is phenomenal. And I was really fortunate to meet so many people like that mindset on Saturday when we did our live show with Dr. Sam White down in Hampshire, which was really good. And it's to see so many people now really taking a keen interest in going back a few steps to what things were like for our grandparents. So you mentioned about that person there about introducing the fridge and freezer, and I'm convinced that processed food and things in sprayed and this, that, and the other was the cause of my nan's death back in 2011. So she was 83, so she's a good age, but she'd never drank any alcohol. She'd never smoked. And the last time she'd been to the doctors was 46 years previously. Wow. And that was giving birth to my auntie at the time, right? But then suddenly she just went totally downhill. And next thing she finds herself in hospital getting an MOT because they didn't have any records on her. And then they said, oh, we found cancer in your liver and it's spreading. And then within 10, 11 days, she was gone. And I noticed, I was just thinking what all the constants are, the things that have changed, the variables and stuff like that. And she'd always lived off the land. They had a greenhouse previously, but then when they sold the house and then downsized to move into a war memorial apartment down in Bournemouth and Dorset, they started going to KFC and then going to the Indian and then eating more microwave meals and stuff like that. So it just goes to show you just how much that can, influence like cancer cells and stuff like that in your body at that age as well.
Children are born into that. So that's why I thought that I would see older people would be sicker, but actually children are sicker.
Children are sicker, yeah.
They've never had half a century where they wasn't exposed to any of this stuff. I mean, even just looking at the vaccine schedule, when I was growing up, there was 13 vaccines on the schedule, and now we've got over 70.
Yes.
So that alone is compromising the immune system. And then you've got to think about the herbicides and the pesticides and the fungicides that have all been approved that weren't around when we were growing up.
Yeah.
And then you've got to think about the fact that there's an overuse of antibiotics and pharmaceutical medications going back to nourishing traditions. If people were unwell, like your nan, it was hot toddies and things like that. It wasn't go to the pharmacy and get a prescription or take some paracetamol. We've become accustomed, again, this quick fix society, to silencing symptoms, not dealing with them, just silencing them so you're comfortable. But that becomes a little bit like a game of whack-a-mole. I don't know if you remember the game where you push it down, it comes back somewhere else. That's what happens, because when I'm seeing a client who's on 17 medications, they didn't start on 17 medications. They started on one, and that led to another, led to another, led to another. You're playing whack-a-mole with your body. You're just silencing things and pushing it down. With cancer, as a naturopath, I call cancer the disease of suppression. So we're suppressing symptoms and signs all the time, which are just messages from our body. And eventually they get louder and louder and louder until we have a chronic disease, chronic illness. The other thing that I think you suppress that can become cancerous, which was definitely the case for my sister, is emotions. You suppress your emotions, you don't deal with it. So my mum and dad died, my sister didn't deal with it. Well, that's a negative, toxic energy that has to go somewhere in the body. and eventually it will come out. And that's how we end up with these chronic illnesses. We do need to kind of press pause and come back a bit to what we were doing a long time ago, because evolution can be positive and negative, and we've kind of evolved to a point where it's actually working against us now and is detrimental to our well-being.
Yeah, and we see it in kids all the time, and it's like, it's horrible to see sometimes. If you go to like a really busy indoor shopping center on a weekend, the amount of like obese children you see, overweight kids, is just constantly going through the roof. So they're, like you said, they're born into this. They're born into all the processed stuff, from an early age, and then obviously you've got the connection to technologies is like off the charts, isn't it? That's all they know: phones, iPads, Xboxes, all the rest of it, and less activity. And doing things for their doing things for their own mind, more than anything. Again, like a lot of children now don't really have any responsibilities at all. Like everything's kind of done for them, and it's all there on a plate. Everything's got an app, hasn't it? It's just like takes that responsibility of doing like away. But also what we're now seeing, unfortunately, which is quite terrible, is the whole patient-physician relationship's just been taken away, hasn't it? So like even things like if you've got any slight types of symptoms, a cough, sore throat, straight away do a test. You're diagnosing yourself. Like never in history before this period have you been able to diagnose yourself and then self-isolate and all the rest of it, because a test which we know doesn't give you accurate results because it tests the protein on especially the lateral flow tests, which obviously vaccinated people have all over their bodies because of the vaccines. So this is why we know so many vaccinated people are testing positive, not because they've got like symptoms, it's because it's running around their body like haywire. So yeah, it's really sad to see as well. So not only is the pharmaceutical industry making copious amounts of billions off regular sort of everyday people, especially in the Western world, they're actually reducing the actual ability to be able to speak to a doctor in the first place if you have got a problem.
All by design, because they want to roll out kind of this AI society where everything is self-governing, self-policing, self-diagnosing. That is all by design. And I think it's very, if they just decided in 2020, right, that's what we're going to do, it would be uproar. But we've had this drip, 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 slow feed rollout, but it's certainly happening, unfortunately.
It's how they do it here in the UK, isn't it? Since day one, they almost test the public's opinion because, not in a biased way, but we're definitely head and shoulders above a lot of people in terms of the way we stand up to like against bullshit, which is what clearly what we're seeing now. And some countries are really, other countries do fantastic things all around the world. You've got the truckers in Canada, and just that whole process alone kind of taken off, hasn't it? And we're going to see it here in England, UK, I believe, at the weekend. And in Australia and Europe and stuff like that. So it just goes to show you, obviously, just how crazy this whole system is that they're trying to create. The NHS mandates obviously being reversed, and the care workers, which is great, because obviously they, again, we say all by design, they lost their jobs on the 11th of November, the day that we remember all the freedoms that were fought for us. You know what I mean? Again, all by design.
Absolutely by design. But what I would say about the NHS mandates, I was just looking at Esther McVeigh's tweet today. Have you seen it? Not yet, no. What she's saying is, don't get too excited, because when you look at the legislation or the paperwork, there's kind of a little bit of a caveat saying that we have to have discussions and it's not fully approved yet. So it could possibly be lip service. It leaves a lot of room for a flip-flop. Because nothing is kind of stamped and sorted at this point. So I really do hope and pray that that's going to be the case. But before we came on air, I was saying to you that I have deeper concerns about the Human Rights Act reform. Yes. Because some of the changes they want to make to the Human Rights Act are very much around bodily autonomy, which is an absolute core value of mine. This my body, my choice is absolutely should always be. But if they make these changes to the Human Rights Act, the mandates for the NHS will kind of power into insignificance, because we will all lose bodily autonomy. We will all lose the right to choose. So while we're kind of focusing and distracted by the mandates, we need to be a little bit more proactive, looking at what could be coming in the next 6 to 9 months. What bills are the government trying to push through? And this Human Rights Act one is really quite concerning for me. That's the one we all need to have our eye on and be protesting and shouting the loudest about.
Yeah, I've noticed that Dominic Raab's already come out and said that this needs to be squashed as well.
Yeah.
Which, you know, rightly so. What I find funny as well is that because of the whole NHS thing and the whole dropping of the mandates and the actual police investigation that is happening, it's interesting to see a lot of these MPs are suddenly coming out with more positive things and not so much chucking each other under the bus, but it's almost like they're trying to, you know, backpedal a little bit.
And the television presenters as well, and you know, the
we knew it was going to happen.
Doctors, Dr. Hillary done a little bit of backpedaling as well, and the likes of Lorraine and all of those ones that were very much on the opposite side of the fence, all of a sudden are starting to turn a little bit. So yeah, it is quite interesting to see, but at the same time, it does make me wonder if it is just a distraction technique so that we take our foot off the pedal. Okay, that's great. Everybody's a little bit more on our side now, and we then don't focus on the things that really could be changing for us, like the Human Rights Bill.
Yeah, and it's been the case all the way along, isn't it? You know, people have become very, very aware of it now about, you know, red flags, distractions and stuff like that, and it has been the case since day one. So even all this bullshit with the whole party situation now, it's, you know, straight away I'm like, well, clearly they've got a file there ready and waiting with all these videos and photos and all this stuff, like, for a reason. You know, they don't just suddenly get leaked all at the same time like that you are seeing now.
The name of that file is probably Distraction Techniques.
yeah. That's the irony. Well, I was saying the other day as well, like, that, you know, I said people shouldn't be pissed off about the fact that Boris Johnson had a birthday, like he had a birthday party. Yep. It's more the fact that while he was having a party, you were all washing your hands singing happy birthday to him.
Absolutely. And, you know, I had a birthday party January last year with my family, and the police turned up. And we didn't, there was no arrest or anything like that, but it wasn't very nice, especially for my children. And in fact, I've got my 10-year-old now. If anybody knocks on the door really heavily, because that's how the police knocked, she runs up the stairs because she's still got that little bit of trauma there. So, you know, that's what I'm so annoyed about. You expected everybody to follow the rules while you wasn't. But it's not that I'm not annoyed that you had a party, because I had a party too, but we should all have been able to do that, because clearly you wasn't that concerned. But actually, it's not my focus, because I do believe it's distraction techniques completely. They know that there are things that are coming further down the line that are very heavy for us and could change things in this country drastically, but they don't want us to focus on that just yet. So that's why we have all these distractions, which is...
It was the same with Djokovic, wasn't it, in Australia? Australia used it as a perfect opportunity, but I mean, to be honest, they didn't have a choice. It was like pin everything on Djokovic, or actually highlight the fact that 4 tennis players had to pull out with heart problems, and even people in the crowd at a tennis match. When's that ever happened? You know, so they're kind of like, they use that ammunition to full effect, didn't they?
Yeah, and I don't know if Djokovic was a willing participant for that, because he is a member of the World Economic Forum after all. So, you know, was he happy to be the kind of patsy, if you like, for that particular distraction? Who knows? When I did my first video and it went crazy, one of the things I said is question everything. But the questioning now has got to the point of, you know, deep, severe paranoia. You've got amazing stuff going on in Canada with the truckers, and people are like, it's a false flag, don't be fooled. It's just like, it's too much. It's way too much. Just calm down, look at what's actually happening rather than second guessing what could be happening. And, you know, I've made a list before we came on. The Human Rights Act could take away bodily autonomy. The Online Harms Bill could take away free speech and could feed into a social credit scoring system. The Nationality and Borders Bill could remove freedom of movement, and 4 million citizens would need to acquire settled status, and they might not get it. They'd have to apply for that. You know, these are the things that could be coming while we're just distracted with really meaningless stuff like Downing Street parties. And, you know, great that it's happened, that Canada's, you know, started to rise, but we need to focus closer to home and let other countries do their stuff. Don't take your eye off the ball with what's happening here. And we've got people talking about repelling the Coronavirus Act, which is very likely to be dropped anyway, because it was a 2-year emergency piece of legislation with 2 6-month reviews. It's not going to be reviewed again. It's not going to be renewed. Probably they'll keep elements of it which will feed into the Human Rights Act and the changes they want to make, but it served its purpose now. So yeah, we just need to be a little bit more careful of what we're focusing on, and really get unified with our message as a truth movement, because that's one thing the government are great at. It pains me to say it, they're very unified with their message, but that's because on the SAGE committee you've got all the psychologists, not the virologists or epidemiologists, it's all the psychologists, and they know what works. And as a qualified hypnotherapist, I know what works too, in terms of getting into people's mind that the brain loves repetition, and they've done that brilliantly. Create scarcity, so that's why we see the queues around the blocks, and when the tests first come out, there's not enough tests, there's not enough PPEs, I don't think we've ordered enough vaccines. And we've seen this with iPhones, people queue for them because they only make so many of them, and everyone wants to be the first one to have one, and it's a marketing tool. It's a technique to create scarcity so everyone wants one. And that's exactly what they've used. And if you can just step back a little bit and think, why are they doing this? It's always quite evident, I think.
Yeah, no, you're totally right. And all the live shows we've been doing, myself and Harry, we've been getting quite a lot of vaccinated people turning up because they want to learn actually what's happened over the last 2 years, that got them to the point where they are now, and what can they do to improve their situation moving forward, and very much want to be part of, this great awakening, as people call it. But it's a lady I was talking to on Saturday night, and she was saying that she was in healthcare and got it early on, when they were just offering them out to like the elderly and vulnerable, but also healthcare staff, frontline. I wouldn't say frontline, I don't like using that term, but people who were very much in the thick of it and patient facing, and because she thought like she'd have to have it for her job or she wouldn't be able to carry on, because this was like February last year, so a year ago, her colleagues or her management were already saying that like you're gonna have it because they're going to make it mandatory. So it was all hearsay even in February, and so people were running off getting it rather than actually going, well, can I have that in writing, or do I actually have to get it? When they weren't even mandated the flu jab. So
I mean, the coercion is insane. And we've seen it. We've seen it with everything. So what's to say that everything that they're pushing now is just not a coercive control or a coercive tactic to get the push for the boosters? This was a little bit of a penny drop moment for me. Somebody who is a client of mine recently lost their dad a couple of weeks after having his booster, and she had to go to his house to sort things out, and she found his vaccine card, and she sent me a photo of it and said, look at this, look what I found, but look at the date he had the jab compared to the date he died, and it wasn't a big gap, but it has an expiry date on that. So it says what batch you received and the date you received it and the expiry date of the batch you received. So if they have an expiry date, what's to say that they had an abundance of these? People were frightened to take the booster because at that point there was a lot of questions being asked, there was a lot of adverse reactions being reported, people weren't feeling well after their first or second one. All of a sudden we've got footballers collapsing, people started to feel fearful, so they've got all of these boosters ordered, sitting there waiting to go, no one's turning up to have them. Along comes Omicron, and then there's the push for the booster, and then all of a sudden people are queuing around the block to get the boosters. It's coercive control.
Yeah, and that's literally pretty much word for word how it's happened, and again, people watching this, like, I'm sure will give you a penny dropping moment yourself, because everyone has that moment in their life. And unfortunately, the majority of my family have like seen through it all, as well as watching the podcast, which has been quite fortunate for me, but not everyone has that luxury. And I find it quite difficult for even like 2 years later, their family unfortunately just can't see it. And I say it on most podcasts, and it's going to take an unfortunate event, I think, for a lot of these people within the direct family, their inner circle, for them to actually go, well, hang on a minute, So it should never ever be like that. But like I said, and I'm sure you're very much the same, and all the other people that have been trying to help people see through this for the last 2 years. Like my arm's always been here for everybody. Do you know what I mean? And always will be. And I was saying that to the people who were speaking to me after the show on Saturday who'd been vaccinated, and I said, look, you're not on your own. You're not isolated. There's millions of people in the same situation now who fully feel duped and angry. Like my DMs are just completely flooded, especially people from the military have been really pushed hard to get it by their superiors and made to feel like they're going to lose their careers, and some of the senior soldiers as well, like with their pensions, it's horrendous. Like honestly, you see some of these messages I get, and like the threats they've had. 21 years in the army, got a year left, so you've done your full 22 and that, and are being threatened with their pensions if they don't make sure all their guys and girls are jabbed and stuff, and it's just horrible. I never ever thought I'd see that as a...
That is across the board. I've spoken to a lot of footballers, and they've told me that they have been told that they won't be considered for games, they won't be considered to play for the country. If they do travel, they'll have to cover all their expenses themselves because they won't cover them as a unvaccinated person. And even you've got some of the coaches and the managers saying that the choices of who makes the team will be considered, the vaccine status will be considered. So we're going to see it infiltrated into every single profession.
Yeah, but with the football though, I mean, football's like almost, it's a religion in itself though, in this country especially, isn't it? So if you're going to try and create an industry to be the best advocate for your product, you're going to target football, aren't you? Because the majority of the players have got TikTok accounts, Instagram. Well, yeah, exactly. But you are seeing people within the industry speak out. I think it's vitally important to create a space for players, coaches, staff to actually go and reach out to someone because they're really worried. And because I imagine that's not the case. Like if you're as a professional athlete and you're seeing all these people like collapsing all over the place, especially if it's one of your muckers, and you've had the experimental vaccination, a lot of players will be shitting themselves. Yeah, like guarantee. And like you're saying, you speak to a lot, so I'm sure that a lot of them would be quite concerned, and just how much stuff's being brushed onto the carpet because they don't want to worry the public. But I think in the next few months, it's all going to blow up and come out. Like there's a lot of stuff that's going to come out, and I think there'll be anarchy of some sort when people really realize the sheer magnitude. If not only have the mass population been duped on this, it's just decades and decades of lies and corruption, isn't it?
Yeah, which in a way, I've said before that I'm trying to see the positive in it, and the positive for me is for the best part of 13 years, I've been speaking out about this and been looked like a complete tinfoil hat, conspiracy theory, nutcase, anti-pharma, just a crazy person. And what I haven't been called isn't really worth speaking about, but COVID has come along and shone a huge torch over everything that I've been saying. And all of a sudden it's like, oh, hang on, that makes a bit more sense now. And this is stuff that people needed to know. They needed to know that they were being used for profit. They needed to know that people's health was being put after the profits. They needed to know all of this stuff. They needed to know that people have been trying to warn them for very many years, and in some cases it's cost them their lives. The amount of holistic doctors that have spoken out, the amount of people who have left pharma and spoken out. Brandy Vaughan from Learn the Risk, who passed away not this Christmas to Christmas before, and she was speaking out massively about vaccines, and lo and behold was found dead on her floor at home by her son. These are people are paying for their lives to get the truth out, and have been for a very long time, and nobody has been listening. But all of a sudden, because it's personally affecting people, because like we say, we have to have that pain point to take action, it's personally affecting us now, all of a sudden they'll sit up and listen. So if there was ever a blessing to be found in this, it's the fact that it shone a torch on all of the corruption that many of us have been screaming about for a long time, and now many people can see it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think over the coming weeks, people are just going to learn more and more and more as a lot of these things evolve. So for somebody who wants to explore, natural path, natural medicines, ancient healing, all that kind of stuff, where would you suggest someone begins with that journey? Because I know there's a lot of people out there that really want to explore it now.
it's such a vast topic, because you've got kind of Ayurvedic medicine, you've got alternative practices like Reiki and transformational breathing, Soma breath work. Wim Hof's been focusing on that. You know, there's just so much out there that, so where to start? I would think if somebody wants to do it for themselves to improve their own health, think about what you need to personally improve. You know, are you a stressed or anxious person, and you need to support that? If that's the case, then you need to look at things like the breathing, and the work of Wim Hof, meditation. If you have conditions that, so what I'm hearing from a lot of people at the moment who are gravely concerned that as an unvaccinated person, they may be refused treatment with the NHS in time to come. And these people are on long-term prescriptions. So they're saying, well, I need to start healing myself, so I don't need that medication anymore. If you are one of those people, you definitely need to reach out to a naturopath or a nutritional therapist, so they can start to have a look at how you can be healed naturally. It's so vast, and people say to me all the time, oh, I want to learn about natural health, where should I start? Well, if you want to learn about it for a profession, then think about what you want to practice in. You know, do you want to be a homeopath? Do you want to be a herbalist? So you might want to do sports medicine, which is completely different. You know, sports science, that does tend to be a lot more kind of allopathic, but it's what resonates with you, really. You know, who am I to say, you know, you must study homeopathy? That might not resonate with somebody.
What about things that are closer to, well, a bit more generic? So things like your water at home, and you know, just sort of everyday, on average, nutrition.
I started on Facebook after I wrote the book in 2017. I started a group, the same title of the book, Mind Body Miracle. It's called the Mind Body Miracle Community on Facebook. It's got about, I don't know, about 10,000 members now. And on there, I've done a series of lives. I've posted lots of information, but it's all very generic information. So things like how to avoid antibiotics. So my children have never had antibiotics, and that's because the minute they get ill, I know what kind of things I need to give them in terms of natural antivirals, natural antibacterials. There's a whole world of that out there too. But other people don't know that information. So I've given that information in a short video so they know what to have in their cupboard should their child get ill. And then I always say, if they're still ill after 3 days, obviously take them to the GP. I'm not anti-medicine, but 9 out of 10 times you can take control of this on your own with a little bit of knowledge. And if somebody is, like I was once, there's no judgment here, a frozen food mum, you know, you're not making anything fresh, you're go all the time, you know, look at making those kind of changes. What can you start to change that you can be consistent with? Start to think about simple meals that you can make that the family will like, that's a bit more nutrient dense than your chicken nuggets and chips that you've been having. What quality of water are you drinking? They're just about to introduce fluoride into every single water supply across the country. You definitely don't want to be drinking that. It's a neurotoxin. So look at some good quality water filters. They don't have to be expensive. I like the zero water filter. It's really great because it's just like a Brita. And so you get your filters. You don't have to have anything fitted in your house. It's not a big investment. So that's a nice slow change to start making. You can always start somewhere. One of the trainings that I did was with Paul Chek. I don't know if you've ever heard of him, but he is a holistic life coach, if you like. And, you know, back in the day when he first come out and he was talking slow, steady state cardio was going to be damaging to the heart and the joints. People thought he was crackers because everybody was just on treadmills and cycling at that point. But obviously, evolution has shown us that he was absolutely right. So he talks about a rainbow bridge, and he says that don't look at what everybody else is doing. Look at what you need to change in your life. What's more important to you? What's the consistent changes that you can make? And that's basically what the book is about. It's called Mind Body Miracle because you've got the mind section, all the things that you can change with your mindset. So be that, you know, whether it's meditation, gratitude lists, whatever. And then the body section is all the things that you can change with your health in terms of your body. So how are you eating? Do you have gut inflammation? And I talk about how to spot that. Do you have a lot of toxins that you are exposed to on a daily basis? Because God knows we all do with environmental toxins alone. And how could you start to reduce your toxic load a little bit? So there's only simple changes, but they do go a long way because it's that tiny compound effect, that drip effect that, you know, small changes done on a consistent basis can make a big difference.
Yeah, exactly that. And I think the consistency is key there. You mentioned that word because obviously,
Yeah.
you know, we only have to look at your New Year, New Me crowd, and people just jack it in after 2 weeks, don't they? Because they haven't got a six
Yeah.
pack. And but it's a lot of it's because they're trying to do too much at once, aren't they? They just confuse themselves, put too much pressure on themselves. So yeah, it's just the small changes. But once you can identify and fully be, you know, in the front of your mind that we are currently in a psychological and a spiritual war of like next level magnitude and have been for some time. What the cult that they want us to be in is basically built and designed to do is to keep us on that path of being sick, being dependent on doctors and pharma and stuff like that. And you know, I'm sure everyone watching now has got a doctor that just prescribes them medication every time they go to speak to a doctor about anything, because that's pretty much what they do. They just put you into that cycle. Even when you say, I've got a bit of depression or anxiety, straight away, get on these pills. You know, so go down the more natural route and understand your body and everything's absolutely critical, you know, more now than ever. And yeah, I think, you know, the points you made there are absolutely fantastic. So where can people find you if they want to learn a bit more? I mean, you mentioned your group there, but where else do you hang out?
So at the moment, I'm on my 9th 30-day ban on Facebook in about 10 months. I'm shadow banned on Insta. So, but I've got a Telegram channel, which is just under my name, Jaclyn Dunne. The Instagram is I am Jaclyn Dunne. I'm on Facebook, which is Jaclyn Dunne again, but then my company name is Mind and Body Detox, which is predominantly my beefy husband doing lots of videos on there, who's a personal trainer and life coach. And then the Mind Body Miracle community page is a really good place to start if you just want to learn a little bit more about changes that you can make to your own health and for your family, because it is that ripple effect. You start healing yourself and it has that ripple effect outside to other people around you, your kids, you know, your parents, whatever. So yeah, just really trying to break it down, because it's very overwhelming in this kind of health and wellness space. It's very overcrowded, it's very overwhelming, there's a lot of information, a lot of it's contradictory. So I always say it's a little bit like climbing a mountain, but how do you do that? One step at a time. Just decide the one thing that's the most important to you to change. You work on that, you focus on that. Once you've nailed it, you move on to the next one.
Amazing. Love it. Absolutely fantastic. Jaclyn, thank you so much for coming on the show today and sharing all that fantastic wisdom with us. I'm sure the viewers and listeners would have really gained a lot of information with what you shared to us today, and perhaps and hopefully implement some changes into their own lives to increase the quality of life and the quality of the second life that every single one of us have got the opportunity to start now, you know, alongside this cult life that they want us in. You know, I was saying it at the talks and stuff, we've got an amazing opportunity here to be part of phenomenal communities, people that just want to do things that's good for them, good for their health, you know, for their mind, in fantastic communities that are just full of like-minded people that, you know, full of love and empathy, because that's how we win this.
Yeah, don't think about what we've lost, think about what we can create now.
Yeah.
So yeah, that would be my final message. But thank you so much for having me on. It's been a pleasure.
Now, awesome. Guys and girls, if you enjoyed the show, please share it with some friends, especially those who are exploring better health. You know, I'm sure they'll take a lot of value from what we discussed today with Jaclyn. If you haven't done so already, make sure you subscribe to my Telegram channel, AJ Roberts Show. Likewise on my Rumble channel, which is where all my videos will be going once they've streamed live. But from me and Jaclyn, look after yourself, guys, and I'll see you very, very shortly on the AJ Roberts Show.